Hello, everyone. This is John Zorn, Executive Director of Arts Reach, and welcome to our webinar today. We're lucky to have Jack McAuliffe with us. He's the president of Engaged Audiences. And I'll give you a little bit of background on Jack. He started out almost 50 years ago to the day as a Ford Foundation Fellow with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And he moved on to being the executive director of presenting at University in Iowa. And then he was the first marketing director of the Kennedy Center, which also included marketing director for the National Symphony. And then he became the vice president and COO of the League of American Orchestras for quite a while. And then for the last dozen or so years, he's been consulting with his own group called Engaged Audiences. And Jack is a wonderful speaker at our conferences, and we're lucky to have him today giving this webinar. So Jack, please take it away.
Thank you, John. And that's one of many times I've been able to say thank you, John. It's been great partnering with you over most of the years that Arts Reach has been in existence. And I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Welcome all of you to this seminar, which I hope is not mislabeled for you as you've sold some tickets, now what? But truthfully, that's really what I want to talk about. In my coaching career with arts organizations around the country, I often find myself in a position of talking with marketing committees or other board members. And I frequently startle them by telling them that arts marketing is not about ticket sales. And there's usually some quiet. And it's because I strongly believe that marketing doesn't end with the sale. It doesn't even begin with the sale. It actually begins before the sale, and it probably never ends. So for me, marketing is all about building relationships. The arts do not survive on transactional ticket sales. The arts thrive because engaged audience members eventually take on an ownership, at least psychologically, of the arts organizations that they care about. So that's what I'd like to talk about today, and I've labeled the real presentation as Relationship Marketing: 5 Easy Steps to Engaged Audiences and Enhanced Revenues. I probably shouldn't use the word easy, but let's leave it that way for now, and we'll talk later if we think we agree with that or not. This presentation is based on some research I did when I was with the League of American Orchestras, as well as some research that's been done since then by a group of senior marketing and development directors at America's largest orchestras, as well as the experience I've had in implementing the findings of that research with my more than 50 coaching clients of various arts organizations around the country over the last dozen years. And so let's get started. The 5 steps I'm talking about here are, the first one is we really need to make them aware of your art form and your company. Before they ever buy a ticket, they need to be aware. Then we need to get them to try a performance, the ticket sale. Then we need to get them to come back. And we're going to spend a fair amount of time about that one because it's been underappreciated. And once we get them to come back, we need to turn them into regular customers. Not necessarily subscribers, although traditionally regular customer has meant subscriber in many different art forms. In the museum world, tends to be members opposed to subscriber, but it's the same kind of committed relationship. And finally, we need to engender a sense of ownership, that people care enough about the arts organization that in addition to a transactional relationship, they also have a donor relationship. And there's a time and a place for that, and we'll talk about that to some degree as well. So this relationship really can be seen as a pyramid, and it begins with your market. And your market is your community. It's various sections of the community. For some of the things you do, your community is very large. For some of the other things you do, your community may be a subsection of your overall community. But what we want to do is we want to turn that market. We want to identify in that market prospects. And let's call that activity awareness. So that's the first of the 5 steps. Then from those prospects, we want to get some people to try us. So first-time attenders, trial, and that effort is acquisition. Then we want to take those first-timers who've tried us and get them to come back as a repeat buyer. And that group of people, that process I refer to as onboarding. Onboarding is a term that we discovered in the Audience Growth Initiative, which was a research. Syntype someone. Onboarding is a term we discovered in the Audience Growth Initiative, which was done by the senior marketing directors group of orchestras back in 2005-06, done by Oliver Wyman, International Consulting Group. They had done a fair amount of research on the concept of churn. In fact, I found a study done by the head of Oliver Wyman on churn in subscription-based industries. Churn is basically when a customer drops out. And orchestras were finding they were experiencing a significant amount of churn. People were coming for the first time and weren't coming back. So we went to Oliver Wyman and asked them to help us investigate it. Turns out the subscription-based industries that they were working with were like smartphone networks and internet providers. They weren't arts organizations, but they got intrigued by our challenge and ended up doing a pro bono study for us that was probably worth a couple $1 million. So we'll share some of the findings there. Onboarding is a term that came out of that. So now we've got somebody that's come back at least a second time, a repeat buyer, but that's not enough. Now we got to get them to become a regular customer. And I call that process nurturing because it is somewhat personal and it's focused on the needs of that repeat buyer. And customer may be a subscriber, may just be a frequent attender, which Oliver Wyman called a snacker. But as long as they come back frequently, year after year, we've got them in the committed customer part. But that's not the top of the pyramid. There's room for one more group up there, which I'm referring to as patron, which tends to be a customer donor who feels a certain amount of ownership. And I call that process bonding because it really can be quite personal in turning that customer into somebody who feels that kind of personal connection and wants to support the arts organization. So let's explore these 5 levels of the pyramid. So the first one is awareness, which is making them aware of your art form and your company. 50 years ago when I started this, we could skip this step because for the most part, the arts organization was sort of the only game in town. We were about the only thing you could do of merit during your free time. Most people had a piano in their living room. Many people sang in church choirs. Our art form in orchestras and in theater and in other areas was a pretty well-known art form among a good share of our market. Today, people can grow up with exposure to all sorts of experiences, many of them not necessarily including our art form, and many more not our particular company. So we need to do that. And one of the techniques that's most talked about here is engaging your community. It's partnering with other community orchestras. Community organizations. It's getting involved in their activities while they get involved in yours. And what I've been working a lot with my coaching clients lately is trying to develop trajectory strategies for various market cohorts. So it's the concept of diversifying your audience is very much in focus today. Although I rather like, in terms of, and rather than using the term diversity, I like to use the term inclusivity. I think it's important to make sure that we're focusing both our performances as well as our marketing efforts on being inclusive of the various segments or cohorts of our audience, not trying to bring them into our activity, but to embrace all of us. And each of these market cohorts may need a different market strategy to engage them in what we do. And so what I find is important in the awareness area is to identify those cohorts in your market, whether it's a whole bunch of millennials that have just moved downtown, whether it's a racial group that's becoming prominent, or an immigrant group that's being prominent in your community, finding a way to be inclusive of them in your performances and in your marketing. I'm not going to spend too much more time on awareness here because I really want to spend the bulk of our time talking about the things that happen after the ticket sales. But I wanted to point out that awareness was important. Then we go to acquisition. And acquisition is what most people think about is traditional marketing, getting them to a performance. And of course, we have the tools of traditional marketing, direct mail, excuse me a second, the screen is doing some strange things. Print advertising like newspaper advertising, broadcast, posters and flyers, outdoor and so forth. 30 years ago, all you had to really do was take an ad in the Sunday paper and you were done. Or maybe send an annual brochure. Today, people have to question whether that ad in the Sunday newspaper makes any difference. Furthermore, drives the whole campaign. So these traditional efforts, especially direct mail, still have an impact, but we have to go beyond that. We've also always done public relations, but we've added to that recently partnerships, where we're working with other organizations in the community to informally share what our organization does and how it does it. And then, of course, there's the area that didn't exist 10 years ago, or certainly not 15, which is our digital communications, the internet, email, social media, web search. I often find when I survey new customers, the most influential thing I did was my Google ad search campaign. It got more attention than anything else I did, and it's probably the least expensive thing I can do after email. My return customers, of course, which were a larger portion of the market, responded heavily to the email, and social media has been strong as well. But none of those things existed 10 or 15 years ago. Today, they probably make up a lion's share of what our what our efforts are to bring in single ticket sales. And then, of course, how effective our website is, whether we're able to identify those people who visit a website for something and then retarget them with a message later. We've all looked at something on the web and then gotten an email a day or two later saying, so have you decided whether you want that convertible yet? And we need to do the same thing. almost more so in our business than most, because our sale is not an impulse sale. People don't see something about an upcoming concert and run to their smartphone and quickly buy a ticket. They may go to their smartphone, they may look up the website, and they might say, "Oh, look at they're doing such and such a play, or they're dancing such and such a program," but they don't buy. They go to the person they would like to attend with and say, "Hey, do you want to go see the so-and-so symphony this weekend?" And then, if they remember, they come back and buy, which is why retargeting can be so important. And then there is group sales. And although traditional group sales have faded a bit in the past, where a group would reserve 20, 40 tickets and end up buying 36 of them through a contract method, we are finding that those are fading a bit. But virtual group sales, where we partner with an organization, the community, offer them a group discount if they will promote an evening of their bank, or an evening of their company, or an evening of their nonprofit at the symphony, at the opera, at the theater. Everybody will get a small group discount if they use a promotional code. There's a variation on that I suggested a couple of years ago, which I call a civic partnership, that can be done with nonprofits, where if, let's take the local food bank. If the local food bank basically says, "We want to thank you for your donation to the food bank, and we've made arrangements for you to get a 20% discount to come hear this chamber concert this weekend," just go to their website and enter the promo code Great Grub, and you'll save 20%. Often in setting up that arrangement with the food bank, we'll then tell the food bank that we'll keep track of everybody who uses the promo code Great Grub, and we will return to the food bank 10% of the revenue that came from their customers. So we've in essence made a donation back to the nonprofit who helped us communicate what we were doing. This is not philanthropy on our part to the nonprofit, because every one of those people who bought with a promo code on our website, we now have their contact information, and we can onboard them. And we need to talk about onboarding as our next topic. So onboarding is simply getting them to come back. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how we discovered onboarding. This was done by the senior marketing directors group of the 10 largest orchestras back in 2005-06. And the marketing director at Philadelphia at that time, Ed Cambron, said, I'm under a lot of pressure from my board to bring in new people. But I looked at my data, and I'm bringing in a ton of new people. They're just not coming back. He said, I bet 75, 80% of the people who come for the first time never come back. And so a couple of the other people that were on the discussion from Atlanta and New York and so forth said, I think that's true here too. Let's look into it. Well, that's churn. And we found Oliver Wyman, who knew about churn, and they came and looked at us with us. And here's what we found in 2005-06. In 2005-06, those 10 orchestras had 21,218 customer households. So that was the size of the beginning market in that year. And this is the year we're looking at. So we didn't know about churn at that point. We just were starting to look at. So 21,218 customers in 2005-06. In 2006-07, more than half of those customers went away. And the part that's still remaining at the bottom of the blue includes your loyal subscribers, your donors. So a good chunk of the single ticket buyers from that previous season went away. But marketing went to work like mad, and by all sorts of hard work, brought in 21,700 total customers the next year, which is 500 more customers than they had the year before. But they had to bring in almost 6,000 new customers to get those 500. So over the 5 seasons, the blue bars represent the customers in 5, 6. The second column, the blue bars were 5, 6. The green column is those that went away. The yellow section is new subscribers. And if you look at the top of those 2 columns, you'll see that the total height of the 2006-7 bar is 1 square higher than the total height of the 5, 6 blue and green bar. And 1 square is about 500 customers. If they had kept 10% more of those customers, the chart would have looked like this. The blue bar in the second column is higher, the green bar is smaller. The yellow bar is about the same size, but it's built on top of a higher blue bar, so that overall there's 2,000 new households as opposed to what was 500 improvement in households. So combating churn turns out to be a very productive approach. And so what do we know about how to get people back? And one of the things we learned back in the first study that I mentioned, which was the audience motivation research that I did at the League of American Orchestras in 2000, 2001, we looked at, I'm sorry, I'll get past that one. We looked at what was it that drove frequency of attendance. And we asked the Gallup organization that did the quantitative research for that audience motivation research report. We asked them what most drove frequency of attendance. Now, Gallup was a little new to this world at that time. So the first answer they came back with, oh, we found the answer. It's whether or not they were a subscriber. If they were a subscriber, they came more frequently. And we said, wow, that's amazing. We need you to dig a little deeper. So they said, well, there is another thing that's interesting. Is the other thing that drives frequency is enjoyment. How much they enjoyed the performance they did attend. The more they enjoyed it, the more likely they would come back frequently. And we said, okay, that we can do something about. You're getting somewhere. Let's look at what drives enjoyment. And they said, well, you know, that's curious too, because familiarity with the art and familiarity with the experience of consuming the art. So take orchestras, the familiarity with the music and the familiarity with the concert environment. The more familiar you are, the more you enjoyed it. And the more you enjoyed it, the more frequently you returned. So, okay, let's push this another step further. What drives familiarity? And they said, well, there are a number of things we've done, but one of them is how frequently they attend. So I said, darn, it's a circle. You know, frequency drives familiarity, drives enjoyment, drives frequency, but it's not a circle. And this got named the frequency spiral because, in fact, it accelerates. As you become more familiar, you tend to enjoy it more, you tend to come more frequently, and as you come more frequently, you become even more familiar, you enjoy it even more. And in fact, your participation accelerates. So we decided in the churn study that we would apply some of the things we learned about the frequency spiral in the audience motivation study. And by the way, we also learned we can intervene at frequency, we can intervene at enjoyment, we can intervene at familiarity. Enjoyment, you intervene at by what you perform, how well you perform it, and in the environment in which you perform it, the logistics, the parking, the ushers. But the most important driver is the art itself and how well it's done. So program it well, rehearse it well, and present it professionally, you enhance enjoyment. Frequency you can improve through a variety of means, the most significant of which is discounting, but discounting only to encourage frequency, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Familiarity you can do actually much better today than you could 10 years ago when we discovered this, because you can create a short iPhone video which gives people insight into an upcoming performance that you can communicate in all sorts of ways, through social media, on your website, through an email, and in fact, give people context for what they're about to hear. That familiarity will prompt enjoyment, will prompt frequency, will prompt familiarity. And so this frequency spiral has become a really key element in understanding how to get more engaged audiences. And what's the impact of this? Here's what Oliver Wyman discovered in their 2008 report of this. The height of the green bars shows the percentage of the customers that attended each of those frequencies. So almost half of the customers that Oliver Wyman looked at came one time. Now, they didn't make up 50% of the audience because they came one time over, let's say, 20 concerts, whereas a subscriber may have come 10 times over those 20 concerts. So they aren't half the audience, but they're half the customers. And that group of almost 50% of the customers, almost 90% did not come back. The churn rate wasn't the 75% Ed Cameron thought it was closer to 90 on the people who came once. If we could get them to a second concert, and there aren't all that many people in the box of 2 to 4 concerts or performances a year, but it's still better than 15% of our audience. The churn rate drops from almost 90% to 50%. That's 5 times as many people come back if you can get them to a second or third performance. And if you can get them to a 5th or 6th, the churn rate drops down to less than 20%. And 11 or more concerts, the churn rate is now down below 10%. So that frequency of attendance dramatically reduces churn. Now, we asked Oliver Wyman, what can we do to get them back more frequently? And they came up with this iBurner chart. These are the various things they looked at. They looked at the genre of the repertoire. So favorite composers was more attractive to get people back than romantic, which was more attractive than classical, which is a hell of a lot more attractive than 20th century. Style, instrumental soloist was more attractive than a vocal soloist. The soloist, a famous soloist, was better than a rising soloist, which was better than no soloist at all. But there wasn't a lot of difference between those. The day of the week made a big difference. Saturday evening was far more attractive to a newcomer than a Friday, and more so than a weekday matinee. Whether you offered a seating upgrade didn't move the needle very much. Exchange privileges, if you did it for free, that was a pretty significant enticement. If you did it for a fee, it was better than not. If you don't allow it, it actually is a negative. We looked at some promotional things like a free drink or a meet the musicians or artist, a coupon for a local restaurant. Some significance there, but again, didn't blow it off. The thing that moved the needle the most was a 50% discount. So if I invited you back to a concert at half off, I was able to see a significant return of people to a second concert. So we found that if we could focus on offering a discount to get people back and a communication that created some familiarity about the event we were trying to bring them back to, we were able to get anywhere from 10 to 20 to 25% of the new to file attenders to come back to a second concert, as opposed to the 10% that happened rather naturally. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of pricing. For a newcomer, it's really the most important lever. And it has to do with this familiarity issue. If you're not familiar with it, you also don't value it as highly as those who are. And we identified in a later study, which I'll talk about in a minute, the concept of culturally aware non-attenders. Somebody, for instance, who attended an orchestra but did not attend the ballet. For the ballet, that's a culturally aware non-attender. And they might pay a fairly significant price for an orchestra concert ticket, but since they aren't familiar with ballet, they're price sensitive when it comes to ballet. So when you're trying to bring in a newcomer, a discount can make a difference to somebody who is not yet familiar with your art form or your company. What's interesting is that deep discounting is almost insignificant for your established audience. They now value your performances, your art forms sufficiently that they also respect the price they have to pay for it. So if you're trying to introduce somebody to come back to a second or a third concert, price can be a huge factor. If you're trying to get somebody to a 43rd concert, I would talk about something other than price, and I wouldn't discount it to get them there. So two things about pricing. One, I recommend using discounting sparingly and only to encourage familiarity. Don't use it because you've got some empty seats in the house tonight and you want people to come for the first time at the discount. Use it to get people to come back. Use it to get people to buy a 3 or 4 concert package. Use it to encourage frequency and familiarity. Don't use it just to fill empty seats. And conversely, if you've got a hot show, dynamically increase your pricing, especially on those areas that are in demand, while you still have some tickets left at that price, because people will pay no attention to the price if they know it's a hot show, i.e. Hamilton. So how does one onboard a first-time attender? There are basically 2 steps that most people follow, and I was just on a call with an orchestra that I'm coaching today who added a third idea to that. And the first one is a communication immediately after their concert, which basically says, so how did you enjoy the concert? How did it go for you? Please drop me an email and give an address to what looks like a real person, and tell me about your experience. And now that you've had a taste of what our art organization can do, we'd like to invite you to come back for another performance. And we'd like to have you come back at a 50% discount. Here's a couple to choose from. You can, and give them a little bit of an introduction to the next concert that feels like the one they went to, and maybe the one after that. And just say you can choose either or both of these at a 50% discount. Simply go online and use this promo code to get your tickets, or give us a call and we'd be happy to help you get tickets. And then if you have a relationship with a telemarketing company, or if you have capacity in your box office staff, follow up with a phone call a week later and just say, hey, did you get our offer? Anything I can do to help you get the tickets? If you follow those 2 things, you can probably get a reasonable number of people to come back to a second performance after that. Again, this is just for first-time attenders. This is not for repeat buyers who are buying single tickets. And the piece that I heard added to that during a call today was, and I think this came up in a Tessatura conference this summer, was there was an organization that put a welcome note on the seats of first-time attenders that basically made the same, hope you enjoy tonight's concert or performance. We'd love to know what you thought of it. Contact us here, and we'd like to invite you back. One fillip that the New York Philharmonic does to that is they make the welcome note come from a musician in the orchestra with the musician's photo, and people have actually been known to come back after the concert and say, is it possible to meet my musician? So that these communications directly related to the concert can very often get a fair number of people to come back. So for first time new to file customers, ask them to tell me about your experience, invite them to return for their choice of concerts at a deep discount, but with enticing context about what those options look like. For repeat buyers, you don't want to keep making this first time offer, or these people, if every time I come, I get an opportunity to come back again for half off, I'm going to turn into a regular half off buyer. So for repeat buyers, I want to offer them to invite for a mini subscription at a deep discount. That mini subscription might be 3 or 4 concerts, either a fixed series or a choose your own series, but get them to come back in that manner. And you could actually do that before they even get to a concert with something like a pick 3 sale, like for a limited period of time. You can get the best available seats at savings up to 50%, but for 1 week only, online or before, as long as you choose 3 or more productions to do it. And so you don't even have to wait for the first time to get there. You can turn them into a more frequent buyer instantly. And you can reach out to customers and get a fairly good response with that kind of a thing. But let's move quickly here to talk about nurturing now repeat attenders into regular customers. And this is often done with an introductory subscription offer. Again, this can be for a traditional curated subscription, which is fixed performances on fixed days. It can be for a flexible custom subscription, which is you choose the concert you want to go to. It can be for a set of 6 vouchers for X dollars. That I find the least effective because you have to remarket it to those people to get them to use their vouchers, and many don't. And more I'm seeing people establish a membership where a little bit like Netflix, you pay X dollars a month automatically billed to your credit card, and for that you can come to any concert of your choice, either for free or at a deep discount, depending on what the monthly charge is and whatever. And this tends to be attractive to younger concert and arts attenders because it feels like Netflix that they're familiar with. The value to the arts organization tends to be highest among the traditional subscribers who are more likely to become donors eventually, less so for the flexible, less so yet for the members who already think they're a donor by being a member. But all of them do create repeat buyers. And then comes my comment that angers my development colleagues, which is don't solicit a contribution yet. These people are still dating, they're not ready to get engaged. So the introductory subscription at a deep discount, first timers only, acquisition only prospecting brochure, follow up with telemarketing or service calls if you can, and don't solicit contributions yet. So now somebody's a subscriber, and when they're renewing for the first time, I call them a freshman. For a freshman, price is still a factor. I got half off this year. You can't just go to full price next year. So you wean them away from an introductory discount to more like the 5 or 10% discount that your established subscriber is getting. So maybe they're getting a 25 or 30% discount. And then you need to do some retention efforts. And those retention efforts can be a whole variety of things. They can be at your first concert, you're invited to a reception to meet a couple of the musicians ahead of your first concert, which creates a comfort level and can improve the number of people who feel good about their subscription. You can invite them to stop by the welcome desk to pick up a chocolate bar and have some board members there who greet them and welcome them and make them feel part of the family so that they go to that first concert feeling like they belong. A variety of other possibilities. But again, even freshmen are not ready to be solicited for contributions yet. You can accept contributions. You can let them know that people do donate, but don't push them for a subscription that they're still price sensitive. And then we come to the last section, which is bonding. And we found that in the Oliver Wyman Audience Growth Initiatives, that there was a lot of relationship between frequency of attendance and propensity to donate. The more frequent people came, the more likely they were to donate and the larger amounts they were to donate. So we ended up doing a second set of studies, which we called the Patron Growth Initiative, patron being customer donor, which we did with Prescott and Associates. And this took us to a level area which I call bonding, which is where we engender a sense of ownership. Aha, development people are now happy because now we want to ask established subscribers for a suggested gift, not just please fill in the blank and put a gift, but if they've been a donor in the past for any reason, ask for a significant increase of that gift this year. If they've not been a donor in the past, ask for a gift of maybe a third of the cost of their subscription. It's surprising how much closer you will get to that than if you leave it just a blank and people fill it in with the amount. Entice them with a surprise and delight benefit. This is also a finding of the Patron Growth Initiative with Prescott and Associates. They asked people about the benefits they got for their donation. And most of us have a hierarchy of benefits. If you give us $10 million, you get this benefit. If you give us $1 million, you get this. If you get $50, you get that. We asked a whole array of donors what benefit they got for their donation, and the great majority of them could not name a benefit. The only ones that could were people that got a benefit like valet parking, which was very tangible, but most people don't get that benefit. Getting your name printed in the program book didn't move the needle. A lot of the other benefits that we offered, people didn't name them as a benefit they got. And when we asked them why they did give, it was to support the arts organization because it's an important part of our community. So the motivation for giving was for that. However, if we gave them a surprise benefit, one that wasn't on a list, like if somebody came up to them at a concert and said, hey, we have an empty seat in the box tonight, would you like to join us in a box for this performance? Or here's a Hershey's Symphony candy bar, just to thank you for being a loyal subscriber or an entry-level donor. And then come back to them a month later with a request for a gift. That benefit is remembered. And then always important is to thank promptly and personally, like not a month later, not in an annual thank you, but immediately after the gift is given. And also don't ask for something every time you communicate with them. In some of the focus groups we did on the audience motivation study, when we had really loyal subscribers in the room, you said, I love this orchestra. If you had colors like my alma mater does, I'd wear a scarf in your colors. But the only time I hear from you is when you're asking me to renew, asking me for a gift. Why don't you just tell me some things sometimes? Why don't you just include me in the family? So don't always ask for something when you communicate. They like to hear about you. They like inside information. Here's finally a finding from the Oliver Wyman. The 5-year value of a patron. The value of them in the first year, the value over 2 to 4 years. In the first year, the blue is the value as a customer. The green, if you can see it, is the value of a donor, almost insignificant. With 2 to 4 years, now this is getting a little higher. After 5 years, now these are both significant. And your core audience that's been with you and is probably established subscriber, the value over 5 years is now significant. So maybe it's worth $200 to one of these 10 largest budget orchestras in 1 year. 4 times that in 2 to 4 years, significantly more in 5 years. And it's back in 2008 when this was done, they were worth $5,000 a year. And what's interesting is they were actually worth more in donations, $2,500, than they were in sales, $2,300. This iBurner chart is even more telling. The x-axis is how frequently they attend. So on the right is very low frequency, then low frequency, medium frequency, high frequency, and so forth. going back is their tenure, very short tenure, under 5 years, short tenure, 5 to 9 years, and so forth. In the front right-hand corner, this is the percentage of customers with low frequency and short tenure that contributed, and it was 5%. Even as that tenure for the low frequency attenders increased to 20 plus years, that likelihood of contributing only went up to 12%. Whereas if we could get them to come 2 to 4 times in even the short tenure, it went from 5 to 12%. And if we got them to medium frequency, it went to 23. And so frequency definitely trumps tenure. And when you put the two together, you can take a beginner at a 5% propensity to donate and turn them into an owner, a loyal patron at 77% over a long period of time, and with a high frequency of participation. So maximizing lifetime revenue, defining as there's a long donor incubation period, but you can cut it short by enhancing frequency. The attendance frequency definitely drives generosity. Support trumps benefit. I want to support the arts organization opposed to I want to get a free mug. And please don't ask them to give because ticket revenues don't cover our costs. It's almost an insult to come to a customer and say, that $75 you paid for the ticket doesn't begin to cover the cost of presenting that concert. Because the response is, then you better get your act together. And it's much better to do it to say, your support allows us to provide these services to your community. So the recommendations that came from these studies is drive attendance frequency. It's the most important factor. No phoned-in performances. Focus fanatically on building relationships. Offer patron-relevant donor benefits, and often by surprise. Put patrons at the core of your communications and develop lifetime value strategies, which are based on everything we talked about here. And that way you can move folks from just existing in your market up the pyramid in 5 easy steps to bonding and becoming patrons. And now I think we have a little time left to take some questions if there are any. John, can I turn it back to you?
Right. Thank you, Jack. That was very enlightening. I don't think it's as easy as you said it was, but let's get some questions from everybody now. Type in your questions into the question box, send them on in, and we'll take care of your individual situations. Jack's a wonderful consultant, coach, and I'm sure that he'd be delighted to tackle whatever you're struggling with. Okay, are you ready, Jack?
I'm ready.
Here we go. All right, how big a discount does it take to move the needle?
In that chart I showed you that showed the really tall bar with a 50% discount to get somebody back, they also tried it at 25%, and they found they got 10 times as many people to come back at 50% than at 25. So when you're trying to get people at the beginning of their relationship, a significant discount is important. And I'm thinking for onboarding, 50% is far more effective than 25 or anything less than that. For subscribing for the first time, 50% is far more attractive than 25. You can walk past any retail establishment in town and see a sign in the window to save 25, 30, 40%. And you already know about their product. You don't know about ours. So we got to really use price to get you in there for another time.
All right. Keep those questions coming in, please. Here's one. What is a surprise and delight benefit?
I mentioned a couple of them during the presentation, but I'll give you more specific on that. Chicago Symphony actually repositioned some of their development staff after this study. They had people that were focusing on trying to get first-time attenders to donate, and they realized that was counterproductive. They were almost always getting no, and then they would often get a $5 gift. And then they found it was harder to get that first-time attender to subscribe because they didn't want another persuasive communication from the orchestra they'd already been asked to give. So they took those people off of trying to convert new-to-file attenders into donors, and instead deployed them at concerts to intercept what the auto racing world would call on-the-bubble customers. On the bubble is you're just about to be disqualified or you're phoning it in. So what they did is they went to those people that were teetering between being a significant owner or returning as a subscriber. So it could have been a first-time subscriber, could have been a donor who's been giving $50 a year for 3 or 4 years and it just never goes up. So what they did is they entered the names of those patrons into the Tessitura database. And when the ticket taker scanned the ticket for that customer, it sent a text message to one of these staff members that Roberta Smith has just come into the hall. She's sitting in L2 and 4. Go get her. And the staff member would then go to find her. And depending on the relationship, if this were a $500 donor that they knew could be a $5,000 donor, they might offer her an upgrade to that seat in the balcony or in the boxes. If it was a first-time subscriber, they might just offer a symphony candy bar and say, just want to thank you for being a loyal subscriber. Because you're here, this is a concert, not a rehearsal. And please be in touch if there's anything we can do. Those sorts of things are it isn't so, now I've seen people give away CDs. They don't have to necessarily have a lot of value. It's more the personal distribution of the benefit that was not expected, which can then result in a further communication later that either returns them as a subscriber the next year or ups the gift if they get solicited a month or so after the surprise and light benefit. And it can be almost anything you can think of, as long as it feels personal.
Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, so if you've got one, hurry up and send it in. Is there any data on how well 2 for 1 instead of 50% off offers work?
Yeah, I think the headline of buy one, get one free, or BOGO, is basically the same as save 50%. The reason why save 50% is, for instance, okay, if we're talking about onboarding, you might want to say buy one ticket to this coming concert and get the second one free. As instead of, get as many tickets as you want at 50% off. If you're trying to get somebody to come back for a 3 or 4 concert commitment, then buy one, get one free is a little awkward. And that's where the 50% tends to work better. But basically, it's the same thing. Even buy one, get one 50% off can sort of fool you into thinking it's buy one, get one free. And that can be effective if you're trying to move a pair of tickets on onboarding. But that's a 25% discount, and I tend to go whole hog and go to a 50% discount. It's just going to get a lot more people back. And if you get them back, you can start lowering the discount.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. A big round of virtual applause for Jack. I do want to mention that we have recorded this webinar. We do put it in our knowledge base. The knowledge base is accessible for current ArtsReach members. If you're not current, if you're not a member, you can become one at artsreach.com. We have all of the recordings of webinars, plus articles from our magazine, plus presentations from our conferences, plus archives of e-nuggets that we send out once per month. So there's just a wealth of information in the knowledge base. So please take advantage of that. And if you're not a member, look into becoming one. We also have another conference coming up in Los Angeles, the end of October, October 29 and 30. We're going to be at the wonderful Millennium Biltmore Hotel, which is just a fantastic grand dome of hotels. And it will be the National Arts Marketing Development and Ticketing Conference. You'll be hearing lots of presentations just like this one, and you can find out the info at artsreach.com. The early bird deadline for that is next Tuesday, so try to register by next Tuesday, July 31.
And what's more important than that hotel is what's going on inside of it. These Arts Reach conferences are so valuable. I've yet to meet anybody attending one saying, boy, within the first hour I came out with an idea that was going to make a world of difference. So I really encourage you, if you're anywhere near one of these, and even if you aren't, find a way to get there. And finally, if we created any kind of questions on any of the stuff we presented today, and you want to follow up with me, feel free to contact me at the email address on the bottom of your screen, jack@engagedaudiences.com. Happy to talk with you about it.
All right, Jack. We just came up to the top of the hour, so really appreciate all your hard work today, and certainly over the years. It's wonderful to have you with us, and hopefully you'll be back soon again.
Great to talk with you all.
Right. Bye-bye, everyone.